I know this is your baby and it's not fair if I ask this question, but if you can pick one chapter that you really, really like about in this book, right? What is that chapter and why?
Well, the chapter's on compassion and compassion for ourselves and others. And I think because it was a theme that surprised me that came out. How many stories were about noticing what was happening with the client or noticing what was happening with our colleagues. So one of the stories is about a colleague of mine who came into my office, and we were sitting at the desk working on a PowerPoint presentation, and he got up to leave. He walked out and he came back in and he said, "Mary, are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine." He walked back out and came back in and he sat down. He said, "No, really, are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm fine. Like, why are you asking?" And he said, "You don't have your wedding ring on today."
Oh.
And I said, "Oh, I took it off because I was going to I have 2 wedding bands. I was going to put a different one on and I forgot." And he said, "Oh, okay." But I thought, how brave was that? What courage it took to ask, one, to notice, but then to ask the question about your colleague's marital status, right? I mean, it could have broken into tears. I could have gotten angry, but he cared enough about me to ask the question. So, I think about in consulting, which is a very evaluative profession, we're being evaluated on how many hours we're building, how many clients are bringing in, how much sales revenue, that sometimes we forget that the people that we're interacting with are human beings, right? And I remember one of the people I interviewed with said, sometimes I think consultants use up all their empathy with their clients and we don't pay enough attention to each other. So it was really that sense of compassion for our clients, compassion for our colleagues, and compassion for ourselves. That was the one that was the most heartfelt for me.
Wow. So who's the target audience for this book, Mary?
I think there's several audiences. I think to start out with folks who may be interested in going into consulting and want to get a flavor of what that experience is like. Not everyone I interviewed worked for a consulting firm. I also interviewed people who had their own practices, who were independent consultants. I think people who have already started, I think when we start out in consulting, we think we're the only ones who don't get it, right? As we're trying to figure it out. And I also think there's stories that resonate with people who are maybe struggling in the mid-career, because some of those stories were really powerful for me, as I heard from former colleagues talk about times when they felt like they were no longer cutting it and was it time to leave. So I think anyone at any point in their career in consulting. But it's interesting, I gave a copy to my hairdresser, who is an avid reader. I gave her a copy. And the next time I saw her, she said, there's so many of those stories that are true for people who study to go into the beauty profession, to become a hairdresser. Because it's anytime you're in an apprentice type of occupation, there's similarities. So I think lawyers, I think a lot of professions, there's stories about what is it like to start a new job? What is it like to feel like you're, that you can't ask questions, that there's a sense of intimidation. So I'm hoping lots of different people read it and get the sense of that they're not the only ones. Kind of like why you started this podcast, right? The struggles and the challenges we face as human beings in the world of work are maybe not all that unique, right? There's some similarities.
Beautiful.